Hello, everyone, and welcome to day 2 of William Mary's 4th Annual Professionals Week. I am Michael Steelman, Director of Alumni Career Management and Professional Networks for William Mary, and it is my pleasure to work with you and thousands of others from the William Mary community throughout the year, providing career resources and professional programming that support your respective career journeys. I'm truly grateful for the continued engagement of our William Mary community to support one another's professional success, and I want to acknowledge and thank all of the William Mary Professional Network's leaders, speakers, and William Mary colleagues who provided the guidance and support to make this week possible. This year's theme is rethinking your relationship with work. Yesterday, we focused on redesigning your career path with our partners at Mission Collaborative. Today, we will discuss the Great Resignation impacting the workforce and explore ways companies are recruiting, retaining, and developing talent. Before I turn things over to today's panel, I just have a few technology items to cover. Today's session is being recorded, and we will notify all registrants once the recording is posted to wmalumni.com. Questions are welcome, and we will address as many questions as time will allow. Just roll over the bottom portion of your Zoom window, and you should see a Q&A icon up here. Please use that feature to submit your questions. You may also use the chat feature, and we'll monitor both throughout the hour. Now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce our panel and moderator. I provided complete bios in my reminder email this morning to all registrants. So for the interest of time, I will do a brief introduction of our panel. I am sure their experiences and expertise will be incorporated into their remarks throughout the hour. First, we have Clem Cheng, Senior Vice President of Human Resources at Comcast. Clem earned his bachelor's degree in computer science and economics from William & Mary and his MBA from the University of Delaware. Next, we have Christa Hokenson, Chief Human Resources Officer of Strategic Education, Inc., SEI. Christa earned her Bachelor's of Arts degree in government from William & Mary. Next, we have Chris Lee, Chief Human Resources Officer at William & Mary. Chris received his undergraduate degree from Auburn University before earning his master's degree from Golden Gate University and a doctorate from Georgia State University. Next, we have Holly Tyson, Chief People Officer at Cushman Wakefield. Holly holds a master's degree in organizational psychology from Columbia University and a bachelor's degree in English and psychology from William & Mary. This terrific panel of experts will be moderated by Latoya Asia, Director of Talent Acquisition and Workplace Planning for Dominion Energy. Latoya earned her J.D. from William & Mary School of Law and studied international law at La Universidad de San Pablo in Madrid, Spain. She also earned a bachelor's of science degree in criminal justice from Virginia Commonwealth University. I wanted to thank each of you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us today to discuss this important topic during William Mary's Professionals Week. Latoya, please take it away.
Thank you, Michael, very much. And thank you to all of those in attendance and, of course, our esteemed panelists. We are very excited for this topic, as I hope you all are as well. It's a very hot topic and something that I know a lot of you are experiencing personally, whether you are in the workplace or seeking an opportunity in the workplace. So Michael already did a wonderful job of kind of giving a quick background of everyone, and I know you have the bios, so we won't spend time with individual introductions. We'll just go ahead and jump right in. So I'm sure all of you know what this topic is, the Great Resignation, but for those who are unfamiliar with the phrase, it's really this idea that employees are just resigning from their jobs in record numbers, something that we have not seen at least in this lifetime. And all of this was really caused and precipitated by COVID. And so, just looking at different reasons and themes as to why this is happening, and particularly impacting those kind of in that 30 to 45-year age range, as data has shown, people are just questioning their career choices. COVID has taught us many lessons. It's changed many perspectives on life. Value of time being a key one. Life is uncertain and life is not promised. And so folks are really looking at ways to, just have more flexibility at work for whatever that may be, whether it's, working remotely or just other flexible options, cutting down commute time, spending more time with family. And some have just flat out, quit their jobs to pursue their dream jobs or try their hand at entrepreneurship. So I saw a really nice quote that summed it up. It's not just about getting another job or leaving the workforce. It's about taking control of your work and personal life and making a big decision, resigning. So I'd really like to kick this off and ask Clem if he could chime in on the first question, which is, are there certain areas or roles within your organization at Comcast that have been the most impacted by the tumultuous labor market, and that is on resignations or just difficult to fill roles?
Thank you, Latoya. So as you framed, we're obviously really in probably the hottest labor market that over the course of my career, you probably saw from the bio, I graduated a long, long time ago. And it is interesting kind of at this phase to see just how active the labor market is. So it's a good time to actually be a worker. People have a lot of options and choices. Within my business at Comcast, it's a little bit bifurcated in terms of what we've seen. We have a huge customer care organization that when the pandemic hit, we virtualized. And so we've actually seen that now that those jobs are not tied to call centers, the applicant volume for those kinds of jobs has really increased significantly. Those jobs are actually more desirable than they used to be. Where on the other hand, for our frontline facing jobs where people have to actually go out into the marketplace, whether to a customer's home or to an Xfinity retail store, those jobs are considered less desirable, and they've been hard to fill. We've had to get really creative around what we need to do to kind of widen our applicant pool, and really just try to hire more on skills and capabilities, less on specific experience. Then when you move to our headquarters jobs, we have like huge numbers of marketing, digital people, a lot of analytic jobs, product management jobs. And we compete largely with the FANG companies in those jobs. So, many of them have unshackled like geographic boundaries and so forth. So we compete head to head with them. So, those are sort of like the hot jobs. And yeah, I think we'll talk a little bit later about what we've had to do to kind of compete effectively there.
Thank you. That's very interesting, Clem, and I'm sure it resonates with others in terms of just the differences and what those hard to fill roles might look like, or those that are leaving, and interesting on the transition and the roles that people now are seeking, that maybe they didn't seek before because of flexibility and other issues. Holly, I'd love for you to weigh in on what's going on at Cushman and Wakefield, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Latoya. I'm really glad to be here. So at Cushman Wakefield, we're a global corporate real estate and services organization. So we've got two sides of the coin. We've got 53,000 employees in 60 countries. And some of them are big commercial real estate brokers, kind of like $1 million whatever. Those are kind of the high flying roles. And we've got people who are janitors. We've got people who are making millions, and we've got people who are making $10, $15 an hour. So we've got this whole continuum of our employee base across all of our different countries. And so as we look at where our retention and our attrition is coming from, it really is a tale of two stories. One is folks who have chosen a commercial real estate brokerage world role. That actually really hasn't changed in the last couple of years. People have chosen to be in that business. In this business, it's actually hit a challenging point, but wise people know never waste a good crisis. And where things have been more challenged on the commercial real estate side now, the more you actually invest in your role now, the more it's going to actually drive success in the future. So we actually haven't seen a spike in our real estate brokers. Where we have seen a spike in terms of retention are in two areas. One is in skilled trades. So we do a lot of servicing. So if you're in any type of office building right now, chances are Cushman and Wakefield is helping manage your building, whether that's changing the light bulbs, making sure the heating's working, all the stuff that's happening in the ceiling panels that I don't know what's happening up there. Our people do that. And those roles are in high demand for skilled trades. And then the other piece is actually the people who are in roles like we are, like Clem and Christa and Chris and you, Latoya, people who are in functional roles, whether that be finance, marketing, human resources, people who have the capabilities and transferable skill sets to go across different industries, they're moving, right? And they are the ones picking their head up and saying, just what you were saying, what do I want to do with my life? Where can I make the biggest impact? What's the purpose of the role I play in the world? I think we're all experiencing some existential reassessment right now. And I have found both within our organization, but also as I talk with my peers across other companies, the same things are happening there too. So folks with the most options tend to be the ones who exercise those options most. So it just means that, as Clem mentioned, and I'm sure we'll get into it, it means that we need to sharpen our pencils and be super crystal clear on what is going to help us engage and retain our employees here. So I'm excited to talk about that later.
Great, thank you so much, Holly. And I'd really be interested, Christa, in hearing on the education front, if there's any similarities, differences. Are you seeing kind of across the board, or kind of separated out, similar to what Holly and Clem have noted in their work? You're on mute, Christa.
2 years operating on Zoom, and I still haven't learned my lesson. In fact, I'm sort of known for it in our organization. So it's wonderful to be here with all of you today. We're actually, the themes that both Clem and Holly shared are themes that are well known to me, and they're in the headlines every day. I will tell you, honestly, we're not experiencing it. We're not seeing it in our numbers. I think some of that is the industry, quite honestly. And some of that is the steps that we as an organization have taken over the last 2 years to build trust, to focus on careers within our organization. You will always have job seekers, but resigners, those that actually choose to leave for something different or better. We started that. Conversation with our employees 2-3 years ago. Those in skilled trades, hospitality, frontline workers that actually have to be present and on site. I hear it, I see it, I believe it's real, it's palpable. But when it comes to functional professionals or educators, we're not experiencing it. On the flip side, when it comes to actually recruiting talent, because we're growing, we are finding it challenging when we are requiring people to be in a certain geography, on site, physically present, and we have the whole conversation around vaccination status, which is one that we've waded through over the course of the summer and through the fall. That has been has presented different types of opportunities for conversation where we haven't established that trust, right? It's when we're trying to bring individuals in the door. So a different twist on it, perhaps, but in the education space. And I'd be interested, Chris, perhaps if you're seeing the same thing at William and Mary.
Well, I think it's a mixture of all of the things that everyone has said so far. The professions and, occupations really matter in how things have affected people. But I think overall, applicants and employees are looking for more options, and organizations need to provide more flexibility. The challenge is the options and flexibility needed for the different professions vary. So you have this weird kind of thing where it's hard for all of us with different kinds of employee groups, disciplines and professions to have a universal policy that has some, sort of even impact across that, right? Because what you would want for frontline workers or office workers or, senior people is fundamentally different. So I think that's the challenge we have. How do you balance options, flexibility, and employee needs? And clearly, employees want more options, and people are moving around to find options and flexibility that supports their lifestyle. And I think that's probably the biggest challenge. How do you adjust to everyone's wants, needs, and desires given the market?
That's great, Chris. And actually, one of the topics, that we really want to talk about is that flexibility, and how has that kind of impacted all of your, your roles at your companies. We know that companies gave work from home options. Some people benefited from that. Some people didn't. Maybe it created more work, which led to burnout and just increased stress. But for the most part, we do know, as you said, Chris, that a lot of people do want flexibility, but that looks very different depending on industry and roles within those. So interesting. And Chris, if you'd like to just kind of kick in, how has William and Mary addressed the desire for folks to have work arrangements? How have you kind of handled that balance at your organization?
Well, knowing that William & Mary is hosting this, I should have, followed the advice of Michael earlier to remind everyone that whatever Chris says is not policy for the university. This is Chris's opinion, right? So I just want to say that. But I would say it's been challenging for the reasons we've described. So let me give you an example. I wrote some notes for myself to say, essential versus non-essential, frontline, versus kind of back office, staff, exempt, non-exempt. So if you start looking at the different kinds of work, the issue of how does your flexibility has affected that, I think that's the challenge. And then you add to that organizational policy, and then misapplication, or misunderstanding of the application of policy by supervisor has been the challenge that I think we've had, where, for example, some offices have flexibility to work from home to a greater degree. And so manager X wants people in the office 2 days a week. Manager Y, she wants people in the office 4 days a week. So then people see the imbalance. So even if you have a universal policy and you have different professions and different operational requirements, individual supervisors have really been the challenge for us in educating, re-educating, preparing them, and providing some consistency. And I think from an employee perspective, they may see, quote, chaos, right? Because it's like, okay, I do A, B, and C, but in the office across the hall, they're doing something else. The truth is, I prefer what they're doing versus what we're doing. And then how do you balance that across the organization? So I think that's the fog and the confusion that we're managing within. And I see Christa shaking her head. So hopefully she, the policy is in policy, if individual interpretation by managers change the interpretation and application of it.
Chris, and say, it is interesting, I think, because it's not only just this creation of policy, like with flexibility, but it's really a lot of just the change management from a leader's perspective. And, we start getting into generational differences and just how things have always been done and trying to push against, that has been incredibly challenging. And that's something that, I know we're experiencing in our company and that I see elsewhere. So it's really interesting to hear, that from your perspective as well, because it's you can create the policy, and if you're wanting to empower leaders to have some level of discretion, whether it's because of the different type of work or just otherwise, just having leader discretion, it becomes this push and pull, and people want what the other people have. So that's a great point. And Christa, would you like to chime in on that topic?
We learned a lot over the past 2 years, and we learned how to be flexible, right? But I don't think we necessarily spent time over the past 2 years figuring out how to make flexibility truly work for us. I am in a business and industry where pretty much everything we do, from product creation through distribution, right? And we're in the education space, but online education for the most part can be done remotely, can be done flexibly. But over the past 2 years, we learned that having everybody go off-site, work remote, we could be incredibly productive and still service our students and our learners. But we lost something when it came to culture. We lost something in terms of the ability to collaborate and build connectivity with our employees. And when it came time, and we were probably early in the pandemic, not as early as William and Mary, it sounds, in trying to bring that sense of community back, bring individuals back into, whether it was an office, a campus, a call center. We spent time really figuring out what was important. And the first decision we made was we weren't going to take a policy-based approach, because we didn't think one size would fit everyone, whether it was the type of work that was done, the team, and we operate in a fairly distributed way. So we asked our managers, our leaders, and employees to get engaged in helping to define solutions. We gave them principles. We said, here's what's really important from a culture standpoint. Here's what's really important in terms of the service that we offer. Now we need all the brains in the game and the voice of our people helping to define what does on-site or hybrid work. How can we think about reinventing the way we work together to produce outcomes? And so we came up with guidance. About 10% of our workforce will come back on site full time. About 60% will be hybrid in some form or fashion, and there isn't one definition of hybrid for us. And the other 30% will probably never return to an on-premise location. We're monitoring that. We're collecting data, whether that is feedback from our employees or from our students. We're looking at productivity and measures, and we're figuring out how to learn and tweak it as we go. But for those that aren't coming back on site, or those that are coming on back on site, premise isn't the only way to get flexibility. One of the things we introduced about a year into living with COVID was taking away a standardized time off policy, or better said, giving our employees the ability to take flexible time off. Some hear it as unlimited, others hear it as I need to get my job done. But it was really, if we had a trusting relationship with our employees, where could we move away from policy and start to introduce guidelines? Where could we empower our leaders and our employees to develop the right relationships and the right standards of work that really help to still achieve the outcome we were going after? So flexibility has been an ongoing conversation. I don't expect we're finished.
And Christa, I love that. I was taking notes as you were talking. I mean, just the solutions, the guidance, the collaboration. I mean, so many companies, rightfully so, I guess, to some degree. I mean, just knee-jerk reaction, made changes, sold buildings, did, a lot of things kind of in response. And of course, there was a lot of information that was not known at the time as to how long things were going to continue and how things would look. But it's so interesting to hear, the approach that you took in terms of really stepping back and listening and involving, input of employees, because whatever the output is, and as you're saying, it's going to be continuous, it's not finished. Everyone was a part of that journey versus, corporate, coming up with a policy and just kind of, sending it down and expecting folks to really apply it in ways that are fair or equal. So I love what you said, even, about hybrid not being one definition, right? There's multiple versions of that. What does that look like based on, different roles? So that's really a great approach.
And it's not without its drawbacks, right? It creates confusion for some. And so we learn we haven't gotten it right. We're not there yet. And I bet there are many learnings for those that are dialed in today.
And I feel compelled to offer some additional context on the whole kind of office-based work, given I'm in the commercial real estate industry. We have a very vested interest in taking a look at what these trends are. And just a couple of things to kind of keep in mind as we think about, we've got our chief economist predicting and driving some of those estimates. Even when people were full-time in the office in the before times, the average office occupancy was 60%. So on average, people were really only in the office 3 days a week, whether that's because they were traveling. I'm in another office. I'm on my office today. I'm in Boston instead of Chicago. But in their given office, on average, most white collar workers were only in the office 60%. Another data point is, pre-COVID, about 25% of workers kind of were considered hybrid, or, part in the office, part at home. And we expect that actually to endure and move to about 50% going forward. So about half of folks will be kind of formally in the office 2 to 4 days a week, which interestingly enough is really just a codification of what was happening before. So I think when a lot of companies are going through this and defining, RTO, return to office, there's been this hand-wringing of how do we define that? Before, I think people were not in the office, whether it's a Friday or what have you, or they'll work from home here and there, but it was sometimes done kind of a little on the down low, didn't want to get the CEO's approval, right? And then we had this big social experiment where everybody all of a sudden had a big Band-Aid rip and worked remotely. And we all realized, to Christa's good point, we could all be really productive, but there's a difference between short-term productivity and long-term trust-building productivity for the future, right? So there are those gaps that we're experiencing, but now we have an opportunity, I think, to get credit for the fact that, and I'm not talking about my company, I'm talking about all companies, get credit for the fact that, we're going to allow this flexibility. We were kind of doing it before without necessarily, some brave companies were codifying it and advertising it. A lot of companies were not. And now it's just an opportunity as the power shift driven by the Great Resignation or the Big Quit has shifted. companies have to recognize, shine a light on their flexibility, or they're going to lose the war for talent. So I think that's, just in terms of what we are seeing, the data show actually that is actually happening as well as we anticipate the future of kind of office space. Let me be clear, the future of the office is still very much intact. How we use the offices is going to evolve and be much more purpose-driven to drive collaboration and innovation and connectivity. But those are some of the key themes that we're seeing across industries.
That's great, Holly. Thank you so much. And, it's just, I think it's interesting when you talk about things happening before but not being codified. It reminded me of a kind of, as we were going back to the office and, folks talking about how do we, just guidance for leaders on if people need to take time off for this or that. And just some of the questions that came up. And it's like, just reminding people, like, we had flexibility in this area before. If people need to take off and go take their kids somewhere or those are all the levels of flexibility that most companies had already, but then you have people second guessing what we actually did before versus now. So it's interesting, to hear that, because I think that's true across the board. Just a kind of reminder, like we've always been a company that allowed this. Now this is just kind of, formalizing. And so there's a question about just how, what are some effective ways that we found to rebuild connectivity and culture with remote employees? But before getting into kind of that communication and kind of keeping those, the connection, Clem, I wanted to see if you wanted to chime in on Xfinity and what you're doing at Comcast in terms of the topic that we're on right now.
Well, Latoya, I don't think I have a lot to add in terms of flexibility. I think the things that Christa and Holly and Christopher mentioned are the exact same things that we've kind of worked through. And I would just double emphasize Christa's point around, it's been a learning journey for us. I think all throughout this 2 years, we've evolved our thinking and approach. We've been a little bit traditional. We've been a very in-office, highly collaborative kind of culture. And I think we've had to really push ourselves in terms of evolving in a different way. And absolutely, for sure, we will be working. The majority of our people will probably be in a hybrid environment. I mentioned before, we have some 100% virtual people. So it's actually, I think, a good thing. Like, to your point, Holly, like we've had to kind of codify some of the things that were more skunk work kind of things that were out there, but not really sanctioned. So I think it's a good evolution for us.
Great, thank you. Well, I guess it's a good thing that we're all in good company. We have similar challenges. Very interesting just to hear the positioning that each company has taken. So the question that came into the chat, which I think is a perfect segue into kind of this, idea that there are a lot of companies that are, of course, not wanting to go fully remote for the reason of feeling like they're losing the culture and the connection and collaboration. I know that's been raised. So the question around, what effective ways have you found to rebuild connectivity and culture within or with remote employees? Would anyone like to jump in? Christa, it looks like you're off of mute. So would you like to?
I'll maybe kick off with where we're investing energy at an enterprise level, which is on our onboarding programs, right? So we're recruiting. We're nowhere near large as Cushman and Wakefield. We have about 9,000 employees worldwide. We, over the past 2 years, have recruited externally about 1,000 employees, but trying to onboard and create a sense of connectivity and culture, both the written and unwritten rules that define how we get work done and how individuals advance their careers. That is hard to convey when you are onboarding basically an eighth, a ninth of your population each year without having a central way to bring people together to create learning opportunities. And so from an enterprise perspective, we're focused on culture and connectivity really on day one, and empowering leaders and managers to think about intentional ways to build culture and connectivity for our employees on a regular basis, knowing that people are teaming in very different ways.
Yeah, Latoya, I would again kind of play off of Christa's comment around intentionality. I think for us, that's been the key, that you really actually have to have specific mechanisms to really keep people connected. And the ironic thing is there's the big, large meetings that we used to struggle to host because of just sheer like capacity. We, go offsite in hotels and things of that sort to do 300-person meetings. Those are very easy nowadays. You just do a Teams call and you can get as many people in there, and we can, produce it nicely if we want with some extra support. The thing to keep people connected, which has been harder, is like the people that are in your flow in terms of meetings and the operating cadence of the business works very well is also, but the people that you used to sort of just, have a drive-by with, that you would meet up in the hallway, you'd see in the cafeteria and all those, they're completely out of your flow now. And so to really have those, those interactions and provide support and understand what's going on, you really have to intentionally set those up. And so we've really emphasized that with our leaders around how do you pull in the people that, that you need to have the connectivity with, but they're just not quite in your normal flow, and having those rhythms. The other thing that we've done is really, we've had to be very much more specific around having discipline and rigor around a communication plan. I think the topic of purpose has come up a few times. I think people have gotten much more choiceful about how they want to spend their time. The work has to be impactful. People don't want a lot of bureaucracy. People want to, just really, make a difference and understand how their work is laddering up through what the company is trying to achieve, and what the company achieves, how does that help, the community or society and so forth even. So we've had to get a lot more intentional around the kinds of things that we're doing in terms of communication. We've set up like a bunch of like listening type sessions. At the beginning, they really revolved around, DEI after the George Floyd murder and the murder of so many other people of color. But we've really expanded that in terms of just trying to really listen hard around all aspects of what people need. Because again, you don't have the same sort of informal channels to have that percolate up. So that would be the things I'd share.
Well, those are great thoughts. And, hearing both Clem, you and Christa talk about being intentional, my brain automatically went to, just the same kind of process that all of us, I'm sure, at our companies have to engage on with diversity, equity, and inclusion. If you want something, if you want a result, you have to be intentional. And I think, for pre-COVID, of course, just all of these things you're describing they just happened, right? People just show up, people communicate, you have all these different mechanisms. But when we really step back and realize that's not possible because people are not in the same place, like what do you need to do? And that just being very intentional. And I connect that into diversity, equity, inclusion on, if we want the results, we have to be intentional and be very thoughtful about, how we're setting those forward. So I think that's been a really good exercise for a lot of companies in both spaces. And there's a couple of questions that are somewhat related to this kind of idea of the culture piece and kind of continuing. So I'd like to just insert a question on just how are folks handling meetings when some folks are remote and some are in the office. So that kind of hybrid meeting piece, are you all seeing anything? And I'm sure it's probably different now than maybe when everyone was fully remote, but how are you handling it now that you have some people coming back or have continued to be in the office? Does anyone want to jump in on that?
I'll jump in there. And I think it relates to the previous question as well. I kind of call it the Zoom room dilemma, right? Where you've got some folks who are remote, some folks who are there in person. And one of the things that we've actually required, it's a tactic, but it actually makes the difference, is when you are in a conference room, bring your laptop and get on screen. So your face is the same as everybody's face on there. Now you may have a camera if you've got a well architected setup where the camera can follow who's speaking in the room, and in which case they have the side of your face and they have the front of your face. But the more that we can actually have this Brady Bunch equality where everybody is the same, probably that doesn't speak to anybody in the younger generation, but my generation, we watched a TV show called The Brady Bunch where everybody's face was on the screen. And it actually allows for greater equality in terms of airtime. So that is actually, I believe, an enduring positive of this, is that the bringing everybody to this remote type of environment really does create equality, because you can't tell from looking at a screen who's the boss, who's not. And it does actually facilitate greater shared airtime is what we're seeing. You know, the other piece that I would just add, Latoya, is as folks are managing through remote, hybrid, full-time in office, which we know is actually not full-time in the office, one of the things that we've been really encouraging our employees to do is kind of what I call agency and agenda. So one, you use the word intentional, right? Take agency over what you do, where you spend your time. This has become one of the key burnout factors for folks who are 100% remote, right? The day starts at 7 a.m. and ends at 10 p.m. and the next day looks the same. And you might not even like shower or get out of your sweatpants, and you've been working all day, and every day kind of is like Groundhog Day. So, you know, basically taking control, being intentional about where you are spending your time. And then agenda is what you are spending your time on. It is very easy, particularly if when we log in and our days are just back to back, no, not even 5 minutes to run to the restroom or get something to eat. And because everything is so scheduled, to Clem's good point, we're missing the lean on the door frame and kind of catch up with, the water cooler has to be architected when people are remote. So making sure that you are really thoughtful about your agenda and actually where you are spending that time is something that we've been really encouraging our employees to do, because there's only so much that the company can do for each individual. Each individual really does need to take agency over their own time and where they spend it.
Yeah,
Really
if I could
like
jump
that.
in. Go ahead, Clem. No, I was going to say, Clem noted earlier the 300-person meeting that happened at a hotel. Teams or Zoom is much more effective for that kind of, sort of gathering if the agenda supports delivering information. If it requires interaction and, culture building and socialization, then it's not. So one of the things we're learning, I think, is that there's some meetings should have always been virtual, but we didn't have the tools and technology. And some things are really better in person. But doing them both is a lesser of the three options, right? Where having some people live and some people Zoom is much more difficult and less productive than having everybody in the room or everybody virtual. So going back to Holly's point about intentionality, I think we're beginning to learn to make those decisions in our planning of meetings, events, and gathering. What is the best modality? Before we had one modality, now I think we have multiple modalities, but we haven't necessarily retooled our thinking and planning for which are better. And if I could also throw in one more plug about planning the day. Today, I was a little discombobulated because I had a meeting that is sometimes in person and sometimes, electronically. And just before the meeting, I was running across campus and then running back because my day wasn't scheduled to allow the travel time. So I think those are the things that we're learning. We're learning how to work differently, all things considered, with the technology. And I think we just now have enough experience to apply the new learnings when before it was just reactive. So I think that's kind of what's going on, at least from my perspective.
Yeah, that makes complete sense, Chris and Holly. And I see somebody put in the chat too that they're looking at, ending meetings like 10 minutes before the hour and stuff like that. And I think those are smart ideas to kind of give people the transition time and take a break, and all those tips that we've all learned actually do make a difference. I wouldn't underestimate the technology front, Latoya, on this thing. Like since I've been kind of coming back in like 1 or 2 days a week for a while now, and the meetings where we've outfitted our rooms with the technology that Holly was referencing, like where the camera follows the speaker and there's good audio quality in there, have tended to work really, really well. But we're sort of refurbishing all our conference rooms, and because the supply chain stuff, it's going to take forever. So we've actually sort of resorted to the bring your laptop in, as you're saying, Holly. But no one wants to come back into the office though and sit in your office on your laptop. You may as well be from home. So I think that again is the intentionality about, what are the meetings with a purpose and what's the best modality that you mentioned, Christopher.
And these are all great, and I'm chuckling to myself because I feel like these are just hearing others say, some of the things that we experience at our companies. It's really interesting because I'm the one that's literally going into the office and sitting in back-to-back meetings on Teams, and I'm like, I could just be at home. I could be much more
Yeah.
comfortable.
And people are, Latoya, if I could just jump in, some people are beginning to be resentful. They're like, okay, you brought me to campus today for this meeting? Like, I mean, this meeting could have been more efficient and effective because we're not sure whether we're at home or we're at work or we're this or that. And people are asking the leader who's hosting the meeting to be judicious with other people's time, right? So it's just like, if it's just information sharing, send me an email or send me a Zoom invite. Don't bring me together because you want the community, kind of thing. It's like by need, not by preference.
That's right. Absolutely. And I just want to remind if any of the panelists, if you see a question in the Q&A chat that you could, if you were able to respond, through typing in the Q&A, please feel free, because I know we're not going to be able to get to all the questions. But I did want to pivot a little into burnout and mental health, because I know that is a huge topic and something that a cause of people leaving companies, one of the reasons, people are leaving fast, but then also an opportunity, of course, for our organizations to retain people if we're able to, to address those issues. So if anyone would be willing to share, just some of the ways that you've kind of handled or tried to prevent employee burnout on your team or just larger organization, and then specifically on mental health, what are some of the things, what does that look like to support mental health at your organizations? So if anybody wanted to jump in on that one first.
Well, Latoya, and like on the mental health stuff, I mean, I think all the companies on here are good quality organizations that for sure through, the normal offerings of a company's employee assistance program and the various different benefit offerings, I'm sure have really been pumping that stuff. I know we have at Comcast to make sure people know all the resources and support mechanisms that are available. But if you kind of distill it down in terms of a person's day-to-day at work, obviously support and appreciation is such an important aspect of having people, feel valued and included and so forth. I think above all, like somebody mentioned this on the panel, the whole area though of, really openness and trust and people being able to really convey how they feel and think about things is just, I think, culturally so important around having a healthy organization. And that is, the COVID has changed so much, and that's what we've talked a lot about that. But I actually think that the whole movement around like racial and social equality is sort of equally important over the last couple of years around just changing the way, cultures and the whole notion of empathy. I think if you're a leader today and you don't have that ability to really empathize and, really listen and understand, you're like done. That is not going to work going forward. And so that plays into, I think, this area of like burnout, really listening for it, really trying to understand like what's going on in somebody's life. We've opened up this whole thing. We get to see what's happening in their homes. It's so much more intimate in a way, over the last couple of years. So I think it's really opened a lot of our eyes.
I'd love to just double down on what Clem was sharing, and I couldn't have said it better myself, but I guess I'll try. About 4 or 5 years ago, there was this famous video that went viral because there was, someone really formal being interviewed. I think it was on CNN, and he was talking about a crisis, I think, in the Middle East, and his little kid opened the door and started walking in, and then the toddler followed in the little walker, and then the poor frantic mother comes in and grabs them. And it went viral because it was so real, and yet it broke the facade that we all have, that none of us actually have a family or pets or a furniture delivery or anything, that the messiness of life, right? Yeah. Fast forward, 2 years ago, all of that has changed. And to Clem's great point, there's a certain level of intimacy that I sincerely hope endures when we start moving back to this more hybrid approach. I have a call every week with my team, and I know that at 8 a.m., my head of human resources for the Americas is going to be braiding her daughter's hair on camera and setting her off to school, right? And she can do both of those things at the same time. She can participate and be where she needs to be. And I make a point of saying hi to her daughter, Vivian, right? I think leaders need to make a point of acknowledging and celebrating the holistic, authentic selves that we all are, who we all are. And I truly hope that on the other side of this, the two things that endure, that have emerged really, I think prevalently is one, that authentic whole self that we all are. I think it's what employees are looking for, to be recognized for that. And to Clem's very good point, empathy from a leadership standpoint. There are all kinds of leadership models, as we all know, right? And yet I believe that over the last couple of years, what has become really apparent is that some of these basic constructs that you could say in level 5 leadership, for example, servant leadership, it's actually become, we've had many more opportunities to see where that is essential. And the whole command and control, to Clem's point, that's, if you're a command and control leader, you're not going to have followers. And so I'm hopeful that becomes actually an even more kind of certified acknowledgement of what true human leadership is versus more of a directive approach.
Well, Holly, I have a spectrum of responses based upon that. So first, obviously as an HR manager, it's heartwarming for us to finally get into the point in our lives that we're acknowledging that the performers, the professionals, the people that come to work actually are human beings, and that we have to be concerned about the person inside the performer if you're going to actually have a real relationship with someone, for them to care about the organization and care about the work, right? It has to be reciprocal. However, it makes it really, really messy, right? And really, really hard. And I think the most important thing for any leader to have done in the past year is to just encourage the heart. If since you're using references to great authors, Kouzes and Posner, those leadership gurus saying that leadership is an affair of the heart. And because people are tired, people are haggard, they're stressed, there's a whole lot of change going on, and then people need help coping. And we've seen a lot of examples. People are expecting the workplace, and the employer to help them manage this dynamic. The challenge is the average supervisor is ill-equipped and ill-prepared in their psychology and tools to help people manage their lives, right? So I started my career as a Marine officer, so I think I have some organic, thoughts about it, because you're responsible for your Marines or soldiers or airmen or whatever, 24/7, day and night. Their personal life is a part of your, purview. But that's not the case in most workplaces. And so now people are braiding hair, they have childcare issues, they have spousal issues, they have kids, and we see that, and we can no longer be blind to it. But just think about how the role of the leader has changed fundamentally. And some people don't want to acknowledge that or deal with that, and it's really, really hard. Some people need help doing that, and all of a sudden the employer is responsible for it. So I think the whole meaning of what is work has changed in the past 2 years, in how we perceive it and how we will manage that going forward. And there are no easy answers, but we do know it's different. And the question is, do supervisors, mostly supervisors, more so than managers or leaders, are they equipped to have that conversation? Because that's what I'm hearing. We have a policy, we have a protocol, the university expects this, but how it's applied is fundamentally different. And then we tend to see the downside of when it's not applied in an equitable, fair, humane way. The university said this, but my supervisor said, I don't care what they're saying, you better be here on Thursday, right? And so that's the problem I think that we're seeing.
That environment, because it is so messy, requires a completely different set of skills in leaders, managers, the application of judgment, the ability to problem solve without having real bright lines drawn, and to think differently about what your end objective is, highlights some very different skills than when we look at our managers, our supervisors, our leaders. The paradigm used to be this, and it is shifting to this. And I think it's incumbent upon us to actually make that clear and then help individuals once we set an expectation to stretch into that. And part of the Great Resignation is really thinking about the future skills that are required for individuals. And I think that's an important part of this conversation today too.
Absolutely. And thank you, Christa, so much. And I definitely want to get to, I know we have about 10 minutes. I do want to touch on some future of work and how you all are looking at that at your organizations. But one thing I definitely want to touch on before that is just really the idea of, just new strategies, tactics, and things that you all have had to deploy, possibly, to compete with the war on talent. Because of course, we have, on one hand, we really want to retain, and we talked some about, different ways in which we can retain the employees that we do have on, whether it's different forms of communication and focus on inclusion and those types of things, and empathy and changing kind of the development of leaders and what that looks like. But now shifting into these open roles that we have, that are just there, and we need to fill them, whether they're hard to fill or just jobs that are, across the industry that are open. So wondering if any of you have deployed any new strategies or tactics, especially in light of the fact, and I know that there's a question in the Q&A on the New York City transparency law, and I know a lot of states and localities have passed laws that really are in place for equity to really put it out there. Here's how much we pay, and they require, and they prohibit employees or applicants from having to disclose what their salary desires are and those types of things. So really trying to get at just this transparency. So just generally speaking, having all of this out there, and while you're trying to compete for talent and having to in some locations maybe disclose salary ranges and then other benefits that you may have. What are some of the things that you all are doing to just compete in this space?
We're kind of doing it all, Latoya. So, and it does depend a little bit about the employee segment. I think, my frontline teammates, we've definitely done a lot of the tactical things around hiring bonuses, some retention pay. Like at the outset of COVID, we did a fair amount of premium pay and whatnot to, recognize and honor the people who are coming in, while the rest of us were able to be from home. But the pay transparency thing and equity in the chat is a really interesting one. A lot of cities started passing these ordinances where employers can't ask about pay from candidates. And, I've been in HR, as you saw, for, a long time. So I used to think that's just crazy. We can't ask that sort of thing. And we're about 3 years into this. We basically, my company has sort of adopted that we don't ask it for even in any locale, no matter if it's required by law or not. And I do think it's really opened up things a lot, because like what people get paid in a company is based a lot on like where they were. And so the fact that we are paying more on what somebody's expectations are, I think is actually, leveling the playing field a lot. So, a few years into this, I'm actually glad that this has become, part of the norm. We actually do a lot to like look at internal equity. We're a large company, so we have the sophistication to be able to do, statistical analysis and ensure that we're not falling into that trap of like companies that are paying, 85 cents on the dollar for females and things of that sort. So we manage that with actually quite a bit of rigor. But I think, your broad question around just what are we doing? Like we've hit on some of threads of it. Like you really have to have, it's really multifaceted. People have to come to work for a company that they know, has a good purpose. The role has to be impactful and meaningful. They have to have the right level of control around their flexibility and things of that sort. And you got to pay people competitively. So when you're competing against good talent, it really has to hit, I think, on all the the core elements to be able to attract and retain the right people.
I would add to that that I don't think we have any solutions. I think everyone is learning and reacting. I think Clem said it best. It's a lot of tactics, but I do think almost every offer is now like you're dealing with an actor or a baseball player, and we are having to negotiate with each person. It used to be, hey, here's the job, terms and conditions, here's the salary, That's what it is. Take it or leave it. Now it's like, well, okay, well, let's talk about, the fact that you might need these flexible arrangements. So I think individualizing, the employment experience is becoming more and more common. I was talking with some other HR colleagues a couple of weeks ago, and a person said something to the effect, but I have a pet. Like, we went away, 2 years ago, and I got a pet for home because I'm working from home. Now I can't come back to the office every day because I have this responsibility. And everyone is expecting the employer to do something to help adjust. When before it's like, your pet, your problem, but now it's like, if you want to retain me, you're going to have to give me more flexibility because this is what I need. So I think it's going to be much more individual than group or class or category than it was before. At least that's my perception so far.
No, that's great. That's great. That's very true. I'm seeing that as well. And Holly and Christa, I'd love to give you all, just the last words. I know we're getting down to the last few minutes, and we're going to have a wrap up by Michael at the end. So if you want to chime in on any final thoughts on this topic.
Sure. I'll add two things. One, to Christopher's good point, one of the things as a data-driven leader that I appreciate about this shift in paradigm of the power between employees and employers is it actually gives people who are in our positions in the human resource or people function more data to bring change initiatives to our leaders. It's one thing for us to say, no, we really should allow bring your pet to work day, what have you, right? But when we can say 40% of the hires that we've extended have said no because they can't bring their pet to work because they're now demanding it, it gives us a little bit more external validation of what we have known for a while. So I think there's a judo move in there in terms of us using that information for our good. And then I'll just kind of leave you with a point as we talk about, as I'm hearing the future of work and expectations of our leaders, and what it's going to take to maintain a sense of equality and engagement. The studies show there is one skill set that is most correlated to what CEOs have that others don't, and that is the ability to deal with ambiguity. And I think the last 2 years have put that into high relief, as Christa has mentioned, right? I mean, this is messy. We are all messy, but what this has shown is it's actually allowed the people who have the ability to deal with ambiguity to show their chops, to rise to the top, to jump on the fumble, to make their skill sets known. And I think that's, again, always kind of looking for the silver lining. I think that is good. This has given us all a chance to deal with ambiguity and show the capability of those who can sculpt the fog and create action and certainty from a vague, uncertain environment. I think that those leadership skills that have been formed on the battlefield right now, I think is going to help us create our next generation of leaders. So I'm excited about that.
And while this period of time is giving us great data, it is also questioning the science of what we do and how we have approached things. And so what I love most about this period is how it is fostering experimentation. And that is both on the part of organizations, but it is on the part of individuals. Individuals are presenting, whether it is a negotiation, a proposition as someone is coming in the door, or as a relationship is changing and we're asking someone to come back to the office. It is emboldening us, right? And I love the possibilities that get created by it. So whether you are listening today as a manager or an employee, I would suggest be open to the possibilities and put them on the table yourself, because this is the time. And I think it gives us all such agency if we allow ourselves to enter into the dialogue. And voice is in part what engages people. And now is the time.
Thank you all so much. That was fantastic. I really appreciate and it seems like there are comments in the chat. Everyone's very appreciative of your time. Thank you. And I'll hand things over to Michael because I know we're right at 1 o'clock.
What a terrific hour. And thank you, Latoya, for moderating this great discussion with incredible leaders. I know it's neat, the William Mary connections. Clem and Holly knew each other. Christa and Holly knew each other. Latoya and you know, it's and Chris were on a panel last year. This is really terrific, and I just love bringing our William Mary community together. And that's the power of this week, and the power of the throughout the year of our networks. I encourage this discussion to continue. I hope other HR leaders that are joining us today or watch this step up and reach out to me, and I'd be happy to do an event with you in the future on this continued conversation. I'm sure some of you will also continue sharing your expertise. Just in addition to the thank you for taking the time out, I want to do a quick plug for the rest of the week. Tomorrow we'll do a Young Professionals Networking event at 7 p.m. Eastern. We'll have a little workshop on networking, followed by a great opportunity to meet fellow young professionals, and we're inviting the seniors as well, graduating this year. So hopefully make some good connections for early career starters. And Thursday, we're actually touching on a lot of the items brought up today in conversation with Clem and others around building community and culture. And we're going to be focusing on the idea of building community in the workplace. This is something that we've been watching and hearing a lot today. And Erica Moritsugu, who's doing a lot with leading up all of Asian Pacific Islander affairs for right now at the White House, is going to moderate that discussion with some terrific leaders of our leadership circles in the William Mary community. So I encourage you all to join us again on Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern if you're available. And last but not least, on Friday, we'll have another networking event for everyone to join us and just celebrate our great community, build connections, and support each other in your career paths. And that's what this week's about. It's about putting the spotlight on this, and hopefully you join us throughout the year. Again, many of the things that were discussed today are what we try to build for our William Mary community, to support you, to recognize your accomplishments, be proud of your role that you're doing in your fields and in your companies, to strengthen those connections in your workplace and among your industries. So please continue to do that. Thank you, Clem, Holly, Christa, Chris, Latoya. Very much appreciate your hour with us today and all the time you did to prepare for today. Thank you, and go Tribe.
Go Tribe. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.